Hi, everyone. Okay, so last time we talked about the ATP and ADP cycle, right? We have ATP, which is the charged battery. If it releases a phosphate, it breaks that high energy bond and that energy comes out for life activities. And you now have a P separated from an ADP, which is like the uncharged battery, okay? And then when you get some energy in your body, you can take the P and add it back on to make the high energy bond and store it. So that's the ATP ADP cycle. And when you go to do things in your body, you go, or in your cells, you go to ATP. So the question for us for the remainder of this chapter is, where is this energy coming from? And that's what respiration is. You take the glucose that you've eaten and you break all those bonds, right? And you do it slowly in a controlled way so you don't burst into flames. And you take that energy and you use it to make a bunch of ATPs out of Ps and ADPs. So we're going to talk about this part now, this reaction of breaking down the sugar to get the energy out and trap it in ATP. And that's what we'll be talking about for the remainder of this chapter, pretty much. All right, there's two ways that we can do this. Two ways we can take sugar and break it down and get the energy out. We can do it without oxygen. It's called anaerobic respiration, and there's just no oxygen required. Right? And you know that's not what we ordinarily do. We have to breathe oxygen all the time, right? So obviously we're taking in oxygen into our bodies because we need it. But it is possible to do respiration without it. We don't ordinarily do that. Under most circumstances, we're doing the other kind that we'll talk about in a bit. But an means without oxygen. The problem with anaerobic respiration, it would be great, right? If we could do it all the time, it would be great because then you couldn't drown, you couldn't suffocate, you wouldn't be dependent on getting oxygen into your body all the time. You could just not breathe and still be alive. But there's some drawbacks to having anaerobic respiration. One is you don't break a lot of the bonds in sugar. You only break a couple. And so you only get a little energy out. And so it's not enough energy to keep us going. Out of breaking the bonds that you do break, the couple of bonds that you do break when you do anaerobic respiration, you only make 2 ATPs for every sugar. That's not very much. Oops. That's not very much. One of the advantages is you don't need mitochondria. It happens in the cytoplasm. So that's really nice. You don't need mitochondria for it. And it's done by some organisms all the time. Yeast and bacteria under extreme conditions. All other organisms will do it. So yeast and bacteria do it ordinarily. And then organisms like us will do it if we're desperate. And so what do you predict about yeast and bacteria? That they are doing anaerobic respiration most of the time. It means that when they break sugar down, they're only getting 2 ATP. They don't get a lot of energy. So yeast and bacteria are not the most energetic of organisms. They don't get to do a lot because they don't get a lot of energy because they don't break a lot of bonds down in glucose. Now there's some advantages. They can survive without oxygen. They don't need mitochondria. The rest of us, on the other hand, plants and mushrooms and animals, we all mostly do aerobic respiration. Of course, the big disadvantage to this is we have to spend a good deal of our lives getting oxygen. And if we don't, we suffocate, drown, die. So oxygen is required. That's a big drawback. But the big plus is that it breaks down tons of bonds. Most of the bonds are broken in the glucose. All broken up into little chunks. And you get a lot of ATP. Out of one glucose, you get 36 ATP as compared to anaerobic respiration that gets 2. Okay, so we're talking about much more active organisms who on one glucose can get 18 times the energy. So really, really, really beneficial to be able to do aerobic respiration. It does require mitochondria. It starts in the cytoplasm and it ends in the mitochondria. So you do need mitochondria. And it's done by pretty much all organisms other than yeast and bacteria. So again, breaking down sugar to get energy so that you can make ATPs, combine ADPs and Ps. That process can be done without oxygen by a few organisms, yeast and bacteria. They don't need oxygen, but they only break a couple of bonds. Most organisms, animals, plants, fungi, protists like amoebas, do aerobic respiration. When they break down their sugar, they break all of them or almost all. And they chop this molecule up into a lot of little pieces, carbon dioxide and water, and get tons of energy out and make lots of ATP, 36 of them. And the disadvantage is that this reaction requires oxygen in that